The moment Daniel Whitaker stepped into the Lancaster Grand, the entire lobby seemed to freeze. The luxury hotel, known for its crystal chandeliers and marble floors, had been a symbol of power and status. But that afternoon it would become the center of a storm dressed in a sharp navy suit. Daniel exuded an air of quiet authority, but it was the black Centurion card he handed over that would change everything. The clerk barely glanced at it before sneering, probably maxed out loud enough for everyone nearby to hear the insult hung in there thick with arrogance. Daniel didn't flinch, but his eyes, cold and calculated, told a different story. What the clerk didn't know was that this wasn't just any guest. Daniel was not only there as a customer, he was the man behind the $2.8 billion deal that was about to vanish in a thin air. He was a senior director of a global firm responsible for overseeing compliance audits. He was a man with more power than anyone in that lobby could possibly imagine, and the disrespect he faced that day, it would cost them everything. By the end of the night, the Lancaster Grand would no longer be known for its elegance. It would be known for its downfall. What happens when one man's quiet dignity exposes the cracks in a billion-dollar empire? You'll want to see what happens next. Like this video, subscribe, and stay with us for the shocking truth. The night Daniel Whitaker walked into the Lancaster Grand, something shifted. The opulent hotel, dripping in wealth, was about to witness its most humiliating fall. From grace, it started with a simple interaction. The clerk at the front desk, Ethan, glanced over Daniel with thinly veiled judgment before sneering, probably maxed out loud enough for those in the lobby to hear. It wasn't an accidental remark. This was deliberate, a show of power in a space designed for the elite. But what Ethan didn't know was that Daniel wasn't just another guest. He was the man behind the $2.8 billion deal that would have expanded the hotel's empire. Daniel remained composed, his expression unreadable, his mind already calculating the next steps. He had come, not just as a guest, but as an auditor. His company had been reviewing the hotel's practices after multiple reports of racial profiling and bias. The treatment he received at check-in wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a much larger systemic issue that the hotel had been sweeping under the rug for years. But Daniel's calmness wasn't weakness. It was power. He wasn't there to complain or fight. He was there to expose the truth. The truth that the Lancaster Grand prided itself on exclusivity, but never bothered to examine its own discriminatory practices. His goal wasn't to play by their rules. It was to break them. Later that evening, after a room downgrade, failed attempts to access the executive lounge, and a few snide comments from staff, Daniel knew it was time. The hotel's culture of bias wasn't just hurting him. It was hurting everyone who had ever been treated like less than, but he had the power to make it stop. Walking back to the front desk, Daniel knew the game was about to change. "Excuse me, Ethan," Daniel said, his voice steady but carrying an edge. "I'd like to know why I've been treated like a suspect here." Ethan glanced up, trying to mask his discomfort. "I don't know what you mean, sir." "Oh, I think you do the card, the downgrade, the way you treated me from the moment I arrived. Let's not pretend it wasn't obvious." Ethan swallowed hard, glancing nervously. The other guests in the lobby, "Let's cut to the chase. I'm not here to complain. I'm here because you've crossed a line." Daniel continued, his tone ice cold. "And now I'm about to make sure everyone knows." Before Ethan could respond, Daniel slipped a business card across the desk, a card that read, "Senior Director, Equity Compliance, Dominion Ventures." Ethan's eyes widened, and in that instant he realized the gravity of his mistake, but it was too late. Daniel left the desk without another word, leaving Ethan frozen in place. His mind raced, but he knew the damage had already been done. Daniel had been documenting everything: the slights, the mistreatment, the overt and subtle racism. His team had been collecting evidence of the hotel's broken systems for weeks. All of it would be sent to corporate, but more importantly, it was going public. The video of the incident at the front desk, where Ethan had mocked Daniel in front of everyone, exploded across social media. What had begun as a quiet humiliation turned into a viral storm. People rallied behind Daniel, sharing their own stories of discrimination. Activists, influencers, and concerned citizens flooded the comments with support. By morning, the hotel's PR team was in full damage control mode, scrambling to issue a statement. But the truth had already spread, and no amount of corporate spin could erase the undeniable evidence. Investors began pulling their money. The hotel's board was in crisis mode, making calls to stop The Bleeding Daniels audit report, carefully compiled and irrefutable, hit the corporate offices, and the board of directors took immediate action. The $2.88 billion expansion deal was pulled without hesitation, and a full review of the hotel chain's operations began. The general manager who had ignored Daniels' complaints was fired on the spot. Ethan, who thought he was untouchable, was quietly escorted out of the building later that day. But it wasn't just Ethan who paid the price. The entire hotel chain was put under intense scrutiny. The board of directors scrambled to save their brand, but their attempts were futile. Within days, the Lancaster Grand's reputation was shattered. Customers canceled bookings, events were pulled, and travel influencers were calling for a boycott. As for Daniel, he didn't gloat. He didn't bask in the public's support. He simply watched as the empire that had treated him like an outsider crumbled beneath its own weight. The scandal didn't just stop with the Lancaster Grand. It became a turning point for the hospitality industry as a whole. Other hotel chains began reevaluating their practices, ensuring that nothing like this could ever happen again. Diversity audits became mandatory, and what had once been a shameful practice was now an industry-wide concern. And Ethan had disappeared into obscurity. His reputation, once inflated by his position at the hotel, was now in tatters. He had been exposed for what he was, a man too arrogant to realize that treating others as lesser would eventually cost him everything. Daniel never returned to the Lancaster Grand. He didn't need to. The world had seen what happened when people like him were underestimated, and he knew that it wasn't just about one hotel. It was about the system that had allowed places like the Lancaster Grand to thrive on inequality. But the real message was clear. When you stand up to injustice, when you refuse to be silenced, the consequences for those who perpetrate the wrongdoing are far greater than they ever expected. So what happens when you challenge the powerful? When you expose the broken systems there on you, watch them fall in the end. Daniel Whitaker didn't just expose a corrupt hotel, he exposed a system built on assumptions, prejudice, and power. The downfall of the Lancaster Grand was inevitable, because it was never just about one man's mistreatment. It was about the toxic culture that allowed such behaviors to thrive. By standing up, Daniel shifted the narrative. He proved that one voice, unwavering and unbroken, can unravel the seemingly impenetrable. The question is, how many other systems are out there quietly operating in the same way, and how many are just waiting for someone like Daniel to speak out? We've seen the consequences of standing up for what's right. But what about you? In the face of injustice, would you stay silent or would you rise? If you found this story impactful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Real Life Stories. Stay with us for more powerful tales that challenge the status quo. What's their all cost of silence? Let's talk about it in the comments.